The Abrego Garcia case. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe and let's talk about this. So today my inner nerd is going to come out, and because I look for these sort of judicial rulings that in ways tell us so much about the courts. So in the case of this Maryland man who has an immigration judge's protective order on him not to be sent to El Salvador, was sent to El Salvador because of an administrative error, something that Donald Trump's Department of Justice conceded or fessed up to. And so the recourse for that was to put this person who had fessed up to the government's administrative error on administrative leave while fighting and trying to not take responsibility for bringing this man who has no criminal record and an explicit order not to be sent to El Salvador has been sent to El Salvador. So the district court judge, because this person is a resident of Maryland, was Judge Paula Sinis. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to read you a small portion, or a pretty large portion because the order was very small. It was a very small order. I'm going to read you an excerpt of it, and then I'm going to read you what Judge Paula Sinis did right after this ruling came out, within a few hours. SCOTUS. The district court's order remains in effect, but requires clarification on remand. The order properly requires the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. The intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. The district court should clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. For its part, the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken and the prospect of further steps. So, I read this as sort of like the Supreme Court saying, yeah, you're right in your ruling that there is due process owed here and he was removed illegally, but we want you to, you use the word effectuate. So we don't know the scope of that word means. And, what jurisdictions it's going to effect. So we're going to ask you to clarify what effectuate means. And also give deference, instructing the lower court to give deference to the executive branch that is owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. Like a kind of schooling the district court on the deference that is owed. Like Judge Sinis doesn't know that. So right after that, the ruling effectively said, bring him back. The effectuate sort of gray area ambiguity, I believe, was the court's way of giving Donald Trump a way to appeal again Judge Sinis's order of what effectuate meant, in order to delay Abrego Garcia's return to the United States. But that was geniusly precluded, I believe, by Judge Sinis's order right after the Supreme Court order. The Supreme Court directed, and this is reading the order of Judge Sinis, after the Supreme Court ruled that there is due process, this man needs to be brought back, upheld the lower court's ruling on the substantive matter. The Supreme Court directed that on remand, this court clarify its use of the term effectuate, according proper deference to the executive branch in its conduct of foreign affairs. To this end, the court hereby amends the order to direct that defendants take all available steps to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia to the United States as soon as possible. So there's no ambiguity to the word directs. And so Judge Sinis quite tritely and quite specifically said that it is in my jurisdiction to tell the government to bring this person back because my district court has general jurisdiction over this man residing in this district, federal district of this country. Further, as the Supreme Court made clear, the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken and the prospect of further steps. Accordingly, the court directs defendant to file by no later than 9 a.m. Friday, April 11th, 2025, a supplemental declaration from an individual with personal knowledge addressing the following. 1. The current physical location and custodial status of Abrego Garcia. 2. What steps, if any, defendants had taken to facilitate Abrego Garcia's immediate return to the United States. And 3. What additional steps defendants will take and when to facilitate his return. To the extent defendants believe any portion of their submission must be filed under certain rules, they shall comply with the court's local rules governing the sealing of materials. Finally, the court will hold an in-person status conference on Friday, April 11th, meaning today at 1 p.m. Eastern Time in the District Court of the District of Maryland. So this order can get no more specific and leaves very little doubt of what this district court judge is asking of the defendants, the government, and directing them, because her substantive ruling that this person must be brought back was upheld by the Supreme Court. The district court's order remains in effect. So this was the clarification that the Supreme Court asked for, and the Supreme Court got in a matter of hours. Now it's up to the government to respond by 9 a.m. today, and then there will be a hearing at 1 p.m. today. This is the judiciary working at the pace it needs to for the type of emergency this case is. And I believe that a lot of cases that are in Venezuela, of Venezuelans who are in El Salvador in prison right now, including Andre, the gay makeup artist, also fall within this category. And this ruling will have an impact on all of those cases that now have to be brought in habeas petition form in the various districts in which these people were residing. And or the other option, which I think is the better option, is because these people who went with Abrego Garcia, like Andre and the other people who I've talked about, they are not currently in physical American jurisdiction, though America has constructive jurisdiction over them. So that case rightly would fall under the jurisdiction of the District of Columbia. So some people may bring that case to the District of Columbia as well. The Supreme Court, quite deliberately in that case, left that ambiguous as to where do we bring the cases for the ones who are now in El Salvador. You talk about prospective cases happening in the jurisdiction of detention or of confinement, but you don't say anything about the people who are in El Salvador still. But that's me talking about the other case, the other cases that are going to be filed or are being filed now on behalf of people like Andre. With that said, this is a sort of a very legal talk update on what is going to happen to Mr. Abrego Garcia, and it is my hope that the government will comply and bring the man back as soon as possible, as the court orders. So thank you very much for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, and do share so other people also know that our judiciary is holding the line, that there is due process of law, that Mr. Abrego Garcia must be brought back. It is now up to the government to get that job done. Take care, everybody.